All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Erin Andrews. If I haven't met you before, I run programming here at Centerville Public Library. I'm excited that you're here with us and with Joan from Green Burial, Massachusetts. We are recording today, and if you'd like to keep your cameras off, that's great, and keep yourself muted so we can listen to her great presentation. Just a couple of housekeeping pieces. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat and Joan will get to them at the end of the program. She says that there's a lot of great info in here, so she hopes she covers everything, but we're leaving time at the end for your questions. Again, this will be recorded, so you can check it out a little bit later as well, share it with a friend. I would like to introduce Joan. Joan Pillsbury has been interested in green burial since 2009 when she read Mark Harris's book. She called her Funeral Consumers Alliance, and she took a field trip to Green Springs Natural Cemetery Preserve to learn about green burial process. And she's been a green burial committee member since, which has since been turned into Green Burial Massachusetts. Joan values the concepts of reduce, reuse, and recycle, has an energy efficient home, and is really passionate about having a green cemetery here in Massachusetts. So I'm looking forward to hearing from her. So Joan, it's all for you.
Thank you. Thank you, Erin. I am so excited to be with you folks at the Centerville Public Library, even though it's over Zoom. And thank you very much, Erin, for inviting me. I'm very happy to speak with you today. Go to the next slide, please. So Green Burial, Massachusetts has been working for over 10 years to educate and advocate on behalf of the green burial option for Massachusetts residents. We are a 501c3, a nonprofit, statewide run organization run by volunteers. We educate and provide presentations at libraries like yours, senior centers, civic groups, and religious professional organizations. We also provide consultation for cities and towns interested in incorporating green burial into their existing cemeteries. Our website has information about municipal and private cemeteries that offer green burial. Green burial is also tied into local and national networks of people working on the natural death movement. Years ago, we created Green Burial Massachusetts Cemetery, and we are working to establish the first conservation cemetery in Massachusetts that anyone can use. Next slide, please. It's a little bit about what we're going to talk about today. I would like you to know what green burial is and what it is not, and the different kinds of green cemeteries. We'll also talk about how you might find green burial in your area. Warnings, there will be pictures of coffins and shrouded bodies in the presentation. Next slide, please. These pictures compare conventional and green cemeteries. And I'm going to define conventional and traditional here because I'm going to be using it quite a bit. So conventional cemeteries are what we're used to these days. And traditional, when I talk about traditional cemeteries, I talk about the traditions of our ancestors before the 1900s. So on the left, you see a conventional cemetery. It's tightly packed lawn that uses grave liners or vaults to protect the casket and prevent the grave from collapsing. Typically, this type of cemetery, there are about 1,000 burials per acre. Most interesting aspect of this picture is the mounds of dirt that are in the back of the slide. That dirt has been displaced by the concrete liners and the caskets that are put into the ground. We refer to this cemetery on the left as conventional because it's what most of us envision when we think of a cemetery these days. On the right, this cemetery holds about a third of the burials of a conventional cemetery. Note the mound in the middle of the picture. This is a grave. Over the course of a year or two, everything below the mound will decompose, become compacted by rain and snow, and eventually will appear as if there's no grave there at all. The more traditional way of burying, one that has been used for hundreds of years in this country, is much like the green burial today. Next slide, please. Why would you want a green burial? Well, maybe you are an environmentalist your whole life, and that would be consistent with your values. Some religious groups, as Judaism, Islam, nature-based religions, already conduct green burials or parts of it. This also appeals to those who are philosophically aligned with the reverence of the earth. Many families may wish to participate in the death care ritual and burial instead of using the services of a funeral industry. In Massachusetts, it is legal, as it is in most states, with the proper paperwork from a town or city where the death occurred to care for and transport the body without involving a funeral director. Green burial may not always be less expensive than conventional burial. In some towns, you can buy a plot for $500 or less, but you do save on the cost of the body prep, the vault, and the expensive casket. Next slide, please. It also green burial offers an opportunity for the family and friends to participate in the rituals. Rituals are an important part of our life. We have rituals for major events like births, holidays, graduations, and weddings. And the end of life ritual is no different. Every culture has a form of ritual to mark the end of life. Green burial is a way of involving family and friends and making meaningful experience. It is powerful for a community to take part in the final act of love and honor the person who has died. These acts can take many forms depending on the rules and regulations of the cemetery. They may include readings, songs, and reflection by those that are gathered, lowering the coffin or shrouded body into the grave, or filling in the grave with dirt. In conventional burials, clergy, funeral directors, and cemetery staff often take the roles on behalf of the family. So this picture obviously is not current because nobody's masks, and you wouldn't see close contact that this picture depicts. Next slide, please. So what is green burial? Unlike conventional burial, everything that goes into the ground is ecological. Everything is biodegradable. This is the way we used to bury our dead in the United States before the invention of embalming in the mid-19th century and the introduction of grave liners. It also became before we handed the responsibility of caring for our dead over to the funeral industry. Families washed, dressed the body for the wake or viewing, made the coffin, and transported their loved one to the cemetery. Green burial, or natural burial, conserves valuable resources, reduces carbon emissions, and contributes to preservation, hopefully the restoration of habitat. Next slide, please. Burial containers for green burial must be biodegradable. So that you could choose pine, wicker, or cardboard, or a shroud. Coffins made with wicker and other sustainable materials are excellent choices, as long as they're not sourced from far away, which would increase their carbon footprint. Some people build their own coffins and use them as coffee tables or bookcases. That's what I have done until they're needed. A shroud can be a plain piece of cloth or one that's held meaning in life, such as a favorite quilt or blanket. Morning Dove Studios in Arlington has cardboard coffins, and they are available for retail purchase at some sites. I can give you information about that if you're interested. So green burial is pretty simple, yet there are businesses that are creating products that are more expensive and unnecessary for simple burial. Locally sourced products are more consistent with the ecological model. A plain box or shroud is all that many people desire. We lots of times hear, just put me in a plain pine box. Next slide, please. Some green cemeteries do not allow markers, while many do, as long as they are made of natural stone and from a local area. Not all green cemeteries allow family and friends to dig the grave, although some do allow closing of the grave to be done by hand, shoveling the dirt over the grave and filling the hole. The depth of 6 feet is not universally a burial death, but in fact, in areas where there's a high water table, a lot of times people are buried above ground. In 2017, our neighbor Vermont revised their laws requiring the depth, which used to require the depth of 5 feet for burial, to allow 3.5 feet deep, which is the optimum temperature and moisture levels for aerobic bacteria so that decomposition can happen more quickly. Often graves are mounded and the dirt settles over time. Every cemetery sets their own regulations for depth, grave density, and grave markers. Next slide, please. So these days we can't talk about burial or anything without addressing COVID-19. So on the Green Burial Council website, which is the national organization, there is information from the CDC and the World Health Organization. So the CDC has a statement that says that burial or cremation may happen with people who have died from COVID-19. The family may choose cremation or burial, and there's not a high risk for contacting COVID-19 from a dead body. The World Health Organization does recommend that embalming not be done on bodies that have died of infection of COVID-19. This is because of the increased manipulation of the body, which could spread the virus. Next slide, please.